one thing to write a letter, but until it gets in the mailbox, nothing's happening. And I still remember the instant that that letter went into the mailbox. And I get shivers every time I think about the click. Because when I heard that click, all the anger, all the rage, all the ugliness that I carried in my body for 12 long years was gone. Absolutely gone. And in its place, I was filled with feelings of love and joy and inner peace, simply from offering forgiveness to another human being. And I also knew in that moment, I didn't need to have another human being murdered by the state of California so that I could be healed, because the act of forgiveness gave me the healing that I had been seeking. And so if I had never heard from him, it would have been all right. I could now go on and live a normal life. But I did hear back from him. And I was afraid to open the letter, because everybody knows everybody on death row is a monster, and what kind of a letter would a monster write to you? And when I did open that letter, I was very, very surprised, because it was written by a man who was obviously very spiritual, very bright, very caring, and so remorseful. And he told me about the losses in his life, and at the end he told me that he would give his life this instant if he could in any way change that terrible night. And he invited me to visit him. He was thoughtful enough to send me 2 visiting forms. So he said, it may be too hard for you to come alone. So here's another form so you can invite a friend to come with you. And so I filled out all the paperwork, mailed it in, and you know, it took the state of California 90 days to decide I would not be a threat or a danger to the prison or the prisoners or the guards. Now, the day that it came for me to go visit, all the people who had said, you can't do this alone, it's too hard, I'll go with you, every one of them at the last minute had something else to do. And I continued my journey alone. And I drove that trip with butterflies in my stomach, and it was about a 45-minute drive, and it was very, very hard to do. And I finally got to the prison, and oh my, it is so ugly. And the noises coming over the walls were so frightening. I have to tell you, this was the most frightening day of my life. I finally found a door that I could get through. I walked up to the guards that were standing behind the counter, and I said, I've never been here before, and I'm absolutely terrified. And they said, don't worry, we'll take care of you, and they did. And you know, many of you have been to visit on death rows, you know, there's a huge process. Luckily for me, people had told me what to wear, what not to wear, what jewelry to leave home, and so I didn't have any problems getting processed easily through. I finally got through 2 different metal detectors, signed in several different places, ended up inside the walls, and there was this red brick wall with a glass door in it that slides, but it was so scratched that you couldn't see through it. And I, in my ignorance, of course, being new to all this, thought I tried to open it, and nothing happened, and I stood back, and I heard this awful noise, and it was the rumbling of the metal on the metal as the door opened, that prison metal noise. And I stepped in, not knowing what was going on, and that door rumbled, and it closed behind me, and I was in a little tiny room. And I finally got through another door into a cage. The cage opened, and I got into a room. Now, the room wasn't really very big, but it wasn't a tiny room either, and it was filled with rows of men with their visitors. And I looked around that room, and what would really surprise me is that there wasn't a single monster in that room. They were all ordinary looking men. They were simply dressed in jeans and blue chambray shirts. And I had to wait for a long time for Douglas Mickey to finally be brought down. And he came over to me and he said, "You do me the greatest honor by paying me this visit." And we sat in that visiting room together for 2.5 hours, and I cried, and he cried, and we cried together. We cried for Catherine's loss. We cried for his loss. We cried for all the things that we had lost in our life. And I came to realize that the night that Catherine lost her life, he lost any kind of life he ever would have wanted or planned for. And I walked out of that visiting room in San Quentin after one visit, and I knew that I would be a political and social advocate, not just for Douglas Mickey, but for all the men and women in death rows all over this earth. And that's what brings me to the fast and vigil. And that's what takes me on the journey of hope, is to spread the message. We don't need to murder another human being so that we can be healed. And that closure is a myth. There'll never be closure on Catherine's life as long as I'm alive. Why would anybody suggest that a state-sanctioned, premeditated murder of another human being would honor her spirit? It dishonors her spirit, and it doesn't bring anybody closure. Thank you so much. Namaste. Questions? Yes.
What happened with
Oh, since 1983. And in California, you do get appointed reasonably decent attorneys when you're in the appeals process. Last year, just before Thanksgiving, his case was finally, we got a judgment on his file at the U.S. District Court. That's a federal court in Northern California. He's gone through the state court, and now he's into federal court. And that federal court ordered a new penalty trial. And I was ecstatic, because how could the district attorney possibly win another death penalty when he's got the entire family of the murder victim ready to get up on the stand and say, we don't want the death penalty? He has a couple other choices too. The other choice is that he could just simply ignore it, not do anything, at which point the judge would automatically give him life. The other choice was to appeal to the Attorney General, to appeal to the court to have it overturned. And so I wrote him a letter, and I was very careful to make sure that his attorneys saw it and made a few changes and approved of what I was doing. I'm very careful never to do anything without his attorney's approval. And I explained to the district attorney that I didn't want the death penalty. I didn't need the death penalty. I had been healed, and I begged him to please, number one, do not have a trial, and number two, to just that I would be very satisfied with if he spent the rest of his life in prison. That would be fine with me, and sent it off. And he didn't answer me for a while, and I was out of town. I came back after the first of the year, and I got a letter from the district attorney saying, I have instructed the Attorney General of the state of California to appeal this federal court ruling. So he's completely disregarded all of my feelings and all of my family's feelings.
Other questions?
How does the rest of your family feel about your kids, about
My children are physicians, they're healers, they're all about